I have been doing these AI workshops for a little over a year now, mostly on Zoom, and it's pretty amazing to be in the room with you. I feel a little shy, but I'm also excited just to be in the room and in community. I teach English at College of Marin. I'm teaching first-year composition right now, and I like to say that I don't feel, even though I've had the chance to really focus on this for the last year and a half, I don't feel like I'm an expert with the answers, really. I have my ideas, but I do feel like it's an all hands on deck. We've got to share and collaborate and discuss and explore this terrain together. So I just sort of offer these approaches, and I welcome pushback. So my plan is to try to keep it practical. I give kind of the way I frame things, but then have some things that we could do pretty easily and see what you find useful, if anything. I'm going to talk about some micro lessons we can use with students on AI literacy and some principles for integrating AI into pedagogy, and then two specific examples, one of which is critiquing AI outputs around whatever we teach, and the other is AI writing feedback, formative feedback for students. And, three. And the final one is AI for research assistants. Okay. So the slides are available through the bit.ly and the QR code, and I'll put that up at the end as well. So all the links will be there. So I like to start framing it in terms of what do my students need from me now that AI is here? What do they need to work with it in their futures? I think that, you don't need the big spiel about how it's here and how we're encountering it in our personal lives and professional lives, and will do so increasingly, and they will do so increasingly. I think what's striking to me that we don't always talk about, since ChatGPT is sort of such a big app of its own, is the way that these systems are becoming integrated into the familiar digital platforms where we do our work. So in work environments, it's going to become the norm that generative AI is sort of available, integrated into the work process. And an example of that, how many people have tried Google's Help Me Write, sort of in beta version? It's one of those things, it seems like you have to be in the know, but really you just sign up and then there it is, the Help Me Write button in Google Docs. Every time you're stuck, there's that little button with the logo that's kind of like magic dust. And it doesn't label, there's nothing in the version history that says what was AI and what wasn't. If you go to this Help Me Write and you say, give me a paragraph on X, gives you that paragraph, asks, do you want to insert it or not? If you insert it, there it is in your document. So this is not built for transparency about what is AI and what is not. And that's another big question for regulation, potentially. But the point is that this is not something that we can set aside. This is something that is becoming part of the work process. So what skills do students really need in order to work with it well, in order to make decisions about when and how to work with it? So just really basically, I think about it as when you're working with these systems, you have to know what you want, and you have to know how to describe what you want. That's where our strengths come in, right, in the humanities. And you have to know that you should question it, and that you should keep trying. That you should, if you don't like what it gives you, you should say, try again, or do it more like this, or I hate that, right? So in order to do those things, you need what we already teach, critical thinking, reading and writing skills, to write these prompts, to have the rhetorical knowledge to know what one could ask for and what's wrong with the output. And you also need subject matter expertise, which is also, I think, what we're doing here in college. So you still need the things that we're doing, which is the first message. It's not that they all have to go off and learn Python in order to use AI in Google Docs. No, the foundation is what we're doing. And you also need to know some particular kinds of weaknesses to look out for in AI output. And we could put that under a broad umbrella of critical AI literacy. So that can include a lot of things. I'm not going to give an exhaustive definition, but it should include things about the platforms like privacy and data rights, as well as copyright. It should include problems with what the AI might give you, like so-called hallucination, which I like to call mirage, because it's really about us, how we interpret it. The AI is not dreaming. Bias, the way these systems are built sort of that disposes them toward bias. And our own automation bias and sort of our tendency to give it maybe more credit than it deserves if it sounds plausible. And sort of that it's not sentient, that there's not an experience of the world similar to ours necessarily. I would argue there's no reason to think that there's sentience. We can explain what's happening with statistics. Okay, that's a lot already, and I didn't even cover half of what AI literacy could include. So how in the world can we begin to teach this to students on a practical level? How is this feasible? I don't want to give up most of my first year composition class. I think these experiences are still important. Not every class can become an intensive AI class. However, I'm going to argue for these kind of, that it is very possible to get started, to have moments where we address these questions. And it can be very impactful, even if it's a 5-minute talk about privacy. And so I'm just going to give some examples of those that you're welcome to use or change or say, no, I don't like that. So I assigned this very popular TikTok video. It's 3 minutes. It's basically this guy explaining very clearly that ChatGPT doesn't understand or know that it's predictive text, that it's based on the statistical analysis of training data. And he just says it really clearly. I also assigned this video, which is actually 2 years old, but it's so good and it's right on for today's text generation AI. And it also includes one of my favorite AI writers, Janelle Shane, who's very humorous and full of funny examples. And that's from Vox.com. So it's like a 7-minute video. This is a favorite reading from the New York Times, and I feel like it's not even something that has to be assigned in its entirety. But what they do is they say, pick your style. Do you want Moby Dick? Do you want Jane Austen, Harry Potter, Star Trek? And then they show you the stages of training a model to copy that style. A very small baby language model, not ChatGPT, but baby GPT. And they show you how it starts out with sort of gibberish, just series of characters that don't add up to words. And as it trains, they start to resemble words. And eventually it gets to this stage where it's very recognizable. The style is so recognizable, but it's still nonsense. It still doesn't make any sense. So I did this one from Harry Potter, and the prompt was just Hermione raised her wand, and the model spit out Professor Dumbledore never mimmed Harry. He looked back at the room, but they didn't pretend to blame Umbridge in the Ministry. He had taken a human homework who was glad he had not been in a nightmare bad cloak. Okay, so my hope is that you get some intuitive sense that, like, this thing is not thinking. But it's mimicking these patterns that are so familiar to us. I like to keep it pretty simple on privacy. I get overwhelmed by terms of service and privacy policies and questions of data rights, to be very honest. It's not my specialty, but I'm continuing to learn about it. And Autumn Keynes, University of Michigan, had this wonderful blog post on having her students annotate the privacy policies for ChatGPT. And I said, that sounds so great, but I think I'm not even going to do all of that. I'm just going to walk into class and say, let's look at them. And it was 5 minutes, and it was, what can they do with our data? Let's highlight a couple of the things here. They can use our data to improve their services and conduct research. That's pretty much anything they want to do with it. Okay, now we know that. So next time you use ChatGPT, remember that, right? Really, really simple. This is another micro lesson that hopefully reminds us that it's not thinking, that it doesn't get it, but this in terms of AI hallucinations or mirages. How do we remember that it can make things up and that what seems plausible might be entirely fabricated? How do we get ourselves to keep checking for that? And I think just memorable examples. This is a image example from Janelle Shane, who has this blog, AI Weirdness, which is absolutely wonderful and hilarious. And she didn't tell it to do something weird. She just said, make these candy hearts with unique Valentine's messages. And so you see how, like, sometimes it's exactly right. There's the love you one, which is perfect. And then there's the others. So sharing that with them. And then I, kind of similar to what Colleen and also Stephanie talked about, I assign annotation, and part of that is sort of fact-checking ChatGPT and finding examples where it has made something up, yet it sounds plausible. So there's a longer description of the assignment, but I'm just going to show you what it actually did. This is an excerpt from what ChatGPT put out. I asked it for surprising facts about AI and sources and an explanation of why the sources were credible. And this is the free version, so it's not the one that connects to browsing. I'll talk about that later. But so it came up with something that looked pretty good to me, and I was expecting it to be real. But no, there is no such paper, and there's no such person as Jan Bengio. But yet, some of that, like what's true and what's not, you've got to look it up. It's not there, and we can actually see what happened here, because there is a Jan LeCun, the head of AI at Meta, and there is a Joshua Bengio, and they have collaborated as godfathers of AI, and they've even written on the topic that ChatGPT mentioned. And so you can kind of see how a statistical model would combine their names, right? Another quick example, things that language models don't do very well. They don't count letters very well. Maybe they'll fix that. But for now, if you ask ChatGPT how many N's are in the word counter, it says 2. There we are. Okay. The lesson is kind of done. Right? It doesn't get it in the way that we do. It's also kind of fun to tell it, no, you're wrong, when it's actually right. So I got it to apologize for giving me, telling me that the decimal for 1/3 was 0.333, that was the rounding, and it said that yes, the correct decimal is 33.34%. So you see that it's designed to sort of predict the next words and kind of please us, and it's not thinking or checking. And we could develop a whole lot of other micro lessons. I'd like to develop them around copyright, around AI colonialism, labor, the human labor that's going into it behind the scenes, and the environmental impact. So this is just a very tiny beginning, but if we want to go deeper into using AI, I think the hope is that we can use it in ways that support our existing learning goals and also teach students about AI at the same time. So my basic approach is to find ways to use AI, if we're going to use it, to support student thinking, to stimulate thinking rather than replacing it, to promote skeptical approaches to AI, and also to build student confidence. So it's not like we will all worship the machine now. Look how cool it is. It's here's what we can do that it can't. So give students actual practice identifying where it's wrong. Because that's a habit that you have to build. Because it still fools me, and I'll be looking at it and say, like, yeah, I think that's right. It did really well that time. And then, 30 seconds later, it's like, wait a minute. No, it did not. I think I already said this. So looking for the sweet spot where the critical AI literacy and the existing learning outcomes are overlapping. And helping students develop a sense of the value of their own voice, their own thinking, their own judgment as they interact with it. So one really simple example you've probably heard is just the idea of whatever you're teaching, let's critique what AI gives us on that, right? So maybe that's them annotating. Maybe that's them, they've written and then they're reflecting on the difference, as the two speakers, I think, used that technique, which I really liked. I have some phrases in my OER textbook that are just supposed to encourage students to do this by giving templates, that it's really okay to say, this looks good, but it doesn't fit my purpose. What I'm looking for is this, or the AI seems to have misinterpreted blank, right? So encouraging students with that kind of modeling. And I think the nice thing about using AI for this is that you can then tailor it to a class theme or a student pop culture reference or identity, or say, like, give me a theme here. Let's generate an example of X concept around that theme. Whether it's, I just tried to be pop culture literate and probably failed, but we have. So you can tailor it much more than in a Google search. So in online workshops, I would say, let's just try this right now. Go to perplexity.ai. The nice thing about that platform is that it doesn't require login. So the students are not giving any data to personal data. They're still giving their prompts. And you can use that like ChatGPT by choosing this writing focus, and then asking for an example of some challenging concept that you teach. And then the question is, well, how well does it do? If it fails on something, is that something the student could identify? Would it be a useful learning experience for them to identify it? Obviously, how does this compare against something else I might try pedagogically for the same concept? And the other main approach that I have, I'm a writing teacher, but I actually am I'm not inviting my students to use AI all that much for writing. It's kind of limited. What makes sense to me, the way I've started out, is by inviting them to use AI for formative feedback that supplements the peer feedback and my feedback. So trying to keep a vision of a human-centered writing process. Because if we don't have a human audience, it's really hard to make the case that there's a lot of point in doing this. And yet at the same time, we know there are feedback needs that are not ever going to be met, even with the best funded program and the best teacher and peer feedback. So there's space to supplement, right? So off hours, immediate writing feedback, being able to come back 5 times with iterations of the same draft. I definitely know that I cannot give as much feedback as I ideally would like to on all steps in the writing process for my students. So this is a delicate, maybe dangerous balance, but I think, it is useful. So why not we can be the ones who sort of guide students. And I think if we present it not as, look, the AI is like the best tutor ever, pay a lot of money for it. No, it should be, the AI is going to give you some feedback, and half of the value of that is going to be in you thinking about whether you agree with the feedback and what you actually want to do, and maybe seeing somewhere where it got it wrong, but then you realize what your own purpose is a little more clearly. So again, giving practice being skeptical or pushing back against the AI outputs. Personally, I'm keeping the feedback, the AI, very separate, so I'm not inviting them to use AI for ideas or brainstorm or outlining or drafting. I have a little tools and rules section, which idea I got from a colleague, and it says you're welcome to use AI for grammar feedback or for essay feedback, but don't use it for these things because the assignment is designed for your maximal learning when you bring the words and the ideas. So I think it's useful to have kind of our guidance around the AI feedback and some guardrails. So I don't want mine to rewrite the text for them. So I know some folks are experimenting with that, and I'm interested, in how that goes. But as far as what I've tried so far, I have more phrases to encourage them to push back against the feedback. They're asked to do a reflection on the feedback, and the reflection prompt sort of says, where do you disagree? Where does it miss your point? What is useful? Did you have any aha moments with it? And this is after they've had a visit to the tutor that was required as homework. So it's like the tutor comes first, and then there's also the AI. So how do you do this in practice? There are a lot of ways to do it. You can definitely use any of these free versions of chatbots, ChatGPT, Claude 3. I've heard that even the free version of Claude is better than the free ChatGPT. Copilot, Gemini, Perplexity. You could use Poe.com is a site that has lots of different customized chatbots that you can pick from, and many are free. And, we've had teachers starting to build bots for this that already have some built-in instructions for feedback, so there's a couple links you can try there. If you want to go a lot farther, you could experiment with Lex.page, which is a word processor that has like a chat window on the side where you're chatting about your draft and your process with AI. I'm not going there yet because there's not a way for me to kind of have transparency with that, but it's intriguing. Now, with all those free options, though, you don't have FERPA vetting, you don't have, a lot of checking for data privacy. So if you want that, we have all these EdTech apps that are proliferating. Feedback Fruits, PackBack, and PowerNotes are the ones I'm most familiar with. And they are building sort of infrastructure for this, for AI feedback, that syncs to an LMS. And so they're a little bit expensive. And what I really don't like is they don't let the teachers customize the feedback instructions. So they have these pre-written kinds of feedback. So I am a volunteer advisor on this app. And it's been really cool to sort of think about how could teachers shape what we want this to look like. And this comes out of my OER background. There was a developer who just wanted to build this, and he decided to do it, and it works. So I won't sell you on that too much, but I will say that what's really neat is that we could write a whole bunch of prompts for feedback and share them with other teachers. So you can opt to have your prompt be shared, and then you've got this huge library, and you can copy other people's prompts and edit them. So if you want a feedback on a research paper, well, there might be 3 or 4 different ways to ask AI for feedback on a research paper. And it really opens you up to all the different ways you could think with AI or use it to push your thinking or support your writing process. So one of the ones I've really loved seeing is feedback just on what could be clarified or what readers might be curious about or confused about, because it's reminding them of the human reader, and it's giving them more ideas for what to write about to meet that word count. And it's able to quote from their paper. It's able to be quite specific about the paper, because it's got not the free, but the GPT-4 higher, more sophisticated model behind it. So I have a whole other presentation on that, which you're welcome to check out or ask me questions about my essay feedback. It is free to pilot. But I guess the idea is that teachers are developing a framework to guide students and say, this is the role for AI. Let's put it in its place in relation to the important things that we're continuing to do and teach. So let's see, how am I doing for time? Okay, great. So I did want to just kind of introduce this other sort of practical use of AI, both for researchers and for students. So, I think Stephanie alluded to this, that ChatGPT used to make things up more, and that's changing. So it will sometimes give you real sources now. And I think what's interesting is that not just the free ChatGPT, but actually the trend is toward combining these systems with an actual search infrastructure that does find real sources. So many of these systems like ChatGPT+, Google's Gemini, Microsoft's Copilot with Bing, Perplexity, they will search the internet and they will generate text based on their training. So you've kind of got both things going on. And we're seeing this in the academic space with all of these AI-based research assistance tools, and I list a whole bunch, and I'm just going to show you one, which is Elicit. How many people have used Elicit? Anybody? Okay, cool. So the thing with these is that it seems like they're giving you the real thing, like you're grounded, you've got real sources now, so you're good. And it seems like that would be consistent with academic values, and like the problem is solved maybe, right? Of hallucination and inaccuracy. But no, it's actually way trickier than that and more interesting than that, because these systems are still generating text based on kind of statistical prediction, but they've now brought the real sources kind of into their process. But they will still get things wrong and make things up. I just asked it for feedback on a recommendation letter like 2 nights ago.